Okay, so we are now at the end of World War II. And what we're going to find out is that Hitler loses, and Germany surrenders May 7th, 1945. 3 months later, Japan surrenders, August 11th, August 14th, 1945. Hooray! The world has been saved, right? Everything is great. Kind of. And well, what happens next? We know that the Treaty of Versailles was an awful peace treaty that arguably caused World War II. That was very unfair to Germany, and the way it split up the Middle East was ridiculous, and it caused more problems than it solved. So they decided this time they were going to do a better job. They were going to learn from their mistakes. And there were actually 3 very important peace conferences that we're going to discuss here that are going to help us understand what the world would look like after World War II, because this is one of the major turning points in world history, maybe the biggest. The world that was created after World War II is a completely different world. It's a whole new world, as Aladdin would say, than existed before. So after World War II, Europe was split up in half. Specifically, we're going to find out that Germany also gets split into 4 zones, the US, the British, and the French zone. And then Eastern Germany would be controlled by the Soviet Union. The West, the US, France, and England believe in free trade. They believe in freedom of the press. They believe in freedom to choose your leader. This is going to be a moment where democracy flourishes. While the East, the Soviet Union, believes in communism. They want government to have complete control over businesses. Government picks the next leader. Government runs the show. This is going to be the big split that is created in Europe, which really is going to turn out to split the world after World War II. And we're going to call this period the Cold War. So the first conference was in 1943 in Tehran, Iran. So they didn't have it in Europe because there was too much fighting going on there. So they go to Iran, and the US president was Franklin Roosevelt, one of the most popular presidents in the history of our world, got the country out of the Great Depression, beat Hitler, right there next to Lincoln. Winston Churchill, the great British war general who took over after Neville Chamberlain's appeasement of Hitler. And there's Stalin, one of history's greatest villains and murderers. But strange times call for strange measures, and this was the alliance. We're going to find out that actually Roosevelt works well with Stalin. Same can't be said for Truman, but we'll get there. So at first they just agree that they're going to split Germany after the war, and they decide, hey, look, we're going to take the west of Europe back. We'll start with Italy, and then France, and then take over moving towards Germany. And since you're already pushing Germany out of the Soviet Union, you guys can go ahead and we'll meet in the middle, right? It was kind of a sandwich approach. And it works, right? We know in 1943 and 1944, land gets taken back. First Italy, and then France and Paris from the west, and then Germany gets squeezed out. Russia takes back the lands of the Ukraine, of Belarus, of the Baltic states, of Poland. And in February 1945, it's pretty obvious the war is over at this point, that Hitler's going to lose. So they meet to try and discuss one more time on how Europe would look after the war. And Stalin says, look, I don't want democracies on my border. I'm afraid I'd be invaded again. This was too painful for me. We know that the Soviets lost the most people by far. They had the most, what you might call, skin in the game. I mean, he says, I don't want these Eastern European countries to have elections because I'm quite sure that they'll choose liberal democracies, and then I'm afraid I'll be invaded again, just like Hitler did. So I want to control the lands of Belarus, of the Ukraine, of Germany, of Czechoslovakia, of Yugoslavia, of Austria, of the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. I want to control those. And Roosevelt says, no, no, no. We need to have fair and free elections in all of the lands, all of the countries that we're taking back from Hitler. And this is kind of a sticking point between the two, but they do agree that they're going to create a United Nations that the Soviet Union would be a part of, that would create a debating place. So there won't be any wars without the UN kind of stepping in, and it'll be worldwide. Okay, it'll include all of the European countries, all of America and Canada and the Americas. The USA, of course, is going to be a big voting member. There's going to be like 5 members of the permanent members of the main group. It's going to be the US, it's going to be France, England, the Soviet Union. And later we'll see another added, but for now, that's what we have. And he says, in turn for that, I will let you have some of those islands in northern Japan off Russia. I'll allow you control of the Manchurian railroads. And I'd like your help fighting Japan. He didn't know that the US had developed the atomic bomb yet. So he was looking for some help in the Soviet Union. They agreed. He also got Churchill to agree to join the UN and be a permanent member of the Security Council. So now, hold on, I just want to show you something real quick. Look though, I just want you to take a look, yes, because if you look at this picture, what you might notice is that it's pretty obvious. FDR is in bad shape, right? When we look at the first picture here, we say, you know, these guys, I don't know, Churchill looks the same. Stalin, maybe he looks a little older. But man, FDR looks good there. He's the leader, right? FDR is on death's bed here. And what we find is that by the time the next meeting comes around, remember now, the Soviets, they're in Berlin, right? The Americans, they freed the concentration camps. They're also in Germany. But by the time the next meeting comes around in July at Potsdam, there's someone new there. Yeah, Vice President Harry Truman is now in there because Roosevelt died. Roosevelt died knowing that the war was going to be over, but he never got to actually see the end of the war. All right, so yeah, we have a new guy in town named Truman, and this time Truman knows that we've tested a nuclear bomb and it's been successful. Truman has probably decided already that we're going to use it against Japan. He doesn't need the Soviet help anymore. You know, some people suggest that one reason why he chose to drop these bombs was to show the Soviets that we got something you don't. You should be listening to us. And when Stalin came in and said, look, I don't want to have free elections. I know that Roosevelt was pushing for it, and I didn't agree or disagree. I kind of said no, but he wasn't a firm no. He says, by this point, I'm a firm no. I don't want free elections in Eastern Europe. I'm going to control these countries. And Truman said, you must have free elections. And this is going to be the beginning of the Cold War. This tension right now is going to be the beginning of the Cold War, which is really an ideological war. It's a war between capitalism, free trade, and communism, government control over businesses, of democracy, free and fair elections, over dictatorships, government chooses its own leadership, and keeps power within its own hands. And yeah, he also says, look, we don't need your help anymore in Japan. I got this. Don't worry. Stalin wanted to help. Stalin was like, I want to be influential in Japan too. He said, no, we got this now. And then, of course, a month later, he drops the atomic bombs. Japan quits the war. The United States takes complete control over Japan and all the islands. The Soviet Union, though, still has control over the Manchurian Railway, over a lot of Manchuria, over the entire East Coast, over those northern Japanese islands. There were some war trials called the Nuremberg trials, where people in Italy, Japan, and Germany were found guilty of war crimes and were killed sometimes. There was also a mass exodus of Germans from Germany to South America, interestingly. So oftentimes there's the old stories that Argentina and some of these South American countries got huge numbers of Germans and Italians, the rich ones, who had supported the Nazis and Mussolini, just left. They just jumped ship because they knew that they were going to be in trouble or they were going to be persecuted, if not killed. This was the generals, right, mostly, who got found guilty and sent to jail. But even the industrialists who supported Hitler, out, right? The businessmen, out. By 1946, the next year, the US and the USSR were already trying to spread their economic ideals. The US, well, let me just say that Winston Churchill made a famous speech where he says an iron curtain has laid down across Europe, and Europe is now completely divided, straight down the middle. And if you look here at this picture, that's what you'll see. The blue countries were the Allies. These were countries that were now going to be democracies and capitalism. I mean, not full democracies. Spain is authoritarian, but they're democracies, and they're going to be under the influence of the US, France, and Britain. Germany is split in half right down the middle. This is East Germany, this is West Germany, and then you see Yugoslavia is going to be friendly to the Soviet Union. Greece is going to be friendly to the US. The Ukraine is part of the Soviet Union. Belarus is part of the Soviet Union. This is Poland. This is Czechoslovakia. And this is going to be Yugoslavia. And this is going to be Romania. Well, this is Yugoslavia. This is Romania, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, East Germany, all influenced by the Soviet Union. This is all the Soviet Union. Ukraine and Belarus, again, part of the Soviet Union. And battle lines have been drawn. We're going to find Stalin hears Churchill's speech and says, that's the declaration of war. And all of a sudden, we're going to begin a new war with these countries. They never actually fight each other. Okay? There's never war between Eastern and Western Europe, like we saw in World War I and World War II. But there's going to be a lot of what we're going to call proxy wars, where there are wars in other places between communists and people who believe in democracy, in capitalism. Okay, so dictator communists versus democratic capitalism. These ideas are going to fight ideologically and physically for the next 45 years around the world, in the Americas, partially, but really in Asia. We're going to see a lot of small wars break out, where the Americans join one side, the Soviets join the other, and although they're never declared war against each other, they're fighting each other, literally fighting each other.